welcome back to my channel, Ujima Flip Books. If you're new here, my name is Jo and I'm a crime fiction, thriller, suspense, Nordic noir reader from the UK, and I am currently melting because it's super hot in the UK at the minute. Like, relative to other parts of the world it's not that hot, but for the UK it is hot, and my window is doing absolutely nothing in terms of getting any breeze through, so yeah, apologies that I am basically melting before your eyes, and there could be loads of background noise because yeah, the window's open, so it's just whatever noises we hear outside, probably lots of cars. But yeah, I'm back with another book review, and today it is Silence of the Grave by Arnaldur Indriðason. I really need to work on my Icelandic pronunciation. Yeah, this is the book we're reviewing today. This is the second book that I have read by him. So, much like the Ragnar Jonasson books, the translation from Icelandic into English has changed the book order since, like, which order that they actually did the translations. So I have read this as book 2 because that is what it is in the English releases, but it's actually book 4 in the series if you stick to the original Icelandic. So yeah, I've read one other book by Arnaldur Indriðason, and it's technically the 4th in the series. I've confused myself now. I've read it as the 2nd, it's technically the 4th. There we go. So what is this book about? So this book is about the discovery of a skeleton in a shallow grave on the outskirts of Reykjavik, and essentially the book is finding out who the skeleton is, what happened to them, was it murder, were they just somebody who got lost in the Icelandic countryside and never came home, that kind of thing. The book is set in the present and also during World War II. So the story is a split narrative of, you've got the storyline that's happening during World War II, and then you've got the storyline of the investigation of the skeletal remains. The skeleton is found like literally within the first chapter of the book, and it's found by, this isn't a spoiler because it literally is like the first couple of pages, but at a child's birthday party, and there is a baby that's chewing on something, and somebody notices that it's actually a human rib that the baby is chewing on. So like straight away that's got to get you hooked, right? And then you don't actually find out until the very last chapters whose skeleton it is, which I think is kind of unusual because I feel like you have like the story arc kind of gets wrapped up in this sort of book a lot earlier than this one did. So yeah, that's the long and short of what the book is about. There's a skeleton. Whose skeleton is it? What happened to them? Any more than that and I will be giving spoilers, so that's as much as I'm going to tell you is what it's about. What did I think of this book? So I think it's pretty clear from the fact of how much I love Icelandic authors, the fact that I've been to Iceland so many times. I am an Icelandophile? Is that even the word for it? I'm going to go with that. I really like Iceland. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about this book was part of it being set during World War II, because the author kind of explains like what buildings were there, what they knocked them down for, what they became. There's a bit where he's talking about the bus station and the police station, and I've been to those places, so it was kind of nice to have like a bit of backstory and history on those places that I never knew about. Like there was a gas works, and then it became an office block that the police eventually moved into. I personally found that really fascinating. I appreciate that to some people it might just be needless background information, but to me it was great and kind of makes me want to read more Icelandic history books from specifically around like World War II. Because yeah, I found it really, really interesting. As the book is set partially during World War II, there's a lot of discussion around British and American forces. So up until World War II, Iceland was part of Denmark, but when Nazi Germany invaded Denmark, Iceland declared independence, and both Britain and America had massive army bases there. So the airport that is in the centre of Reykjavik, that was the British base, and they built that runway and airport facilities, and then the airport that is used by international carriers now at Keflavik, that was the American airport, and all the American base was all around Keflavik. One of our Icelandic friends has taken us on sort of a tour of some of the infrastructure that was left by the American and British troops, where it's just kind of like abandoned buildings and fence posts, things like that. It was really good getting a sort of inside view, if you like, of what an Icelandic author thought of sort of similar structures to the ones that I'd been to see. One thing that I think Indriðason totally nailed was the hurrying up of the archaeologists. So in the book, Detective Erlendur is constantly trying to get the archaeologists to move quicker and to give him answers, and the archaeologists are like, no, it takes as long as it takes. That is a perfect representation of commercial archaeology. I've done a lot of digs in my time where it's mainly like construction sites where they've accidentally found like archaeology remains. So this could be very boring, so apologies, but when somebody decides to like construct a site in an area where they know it's got a lot of archaeological remains, so nearest one for me is the city of Chester. That was a Roman city called Diva. It has like tons of archaeological significance, and you're constantly finding things. Like, you don't have to dig very far until you're hitting medieval and Roman roads. So any construction done in Chester, people will always do what are called boreholes, which are literally essentially a sample of the soil. So you drill it down, take out a chunk, and then see what you have hit, see if you're going to risk hitting anything. I've worked at sites where the boreholes found absolutely nothing, and then once they've started actually doing the construction, they've found entire cemeteries, Roman villas and mosaic floors, the works. And the only thing that people cared about was, how long is this going to take? Like, that is the primary thing. Why can't you go quicker? Which, if you've ever tried to dig something up that is incredibly small with a small tiny tool, it is not a quick process. Like leaf trowels, I'll insert a picture here of a leaf trowel, that kind of the main thing that you used around bones. They're tiny, and some of the bones are very small, and yeah, it's not a quick process. I know from reading some reviews, people seem to have issue with the archaeology within the book, saying about how does an archaeologist not know if a skeleton is male or female? They should be able to tell just by looking. And yes, if you're a forensic archaeologist, you probably could tell. Like, there's certain skeletal markers that you can look for. Like, I'm sure everyone's heard of like the pelvis being different between male and females, but there's also other things like on the skull. You've got something like around this general area called a mastoid process, which is generally larger on males than females, things like that. But if you're not trained in forensic archaeology, it's just bones. It's the same as me going to a site and being all like, this is the remains of, like, think of an example, a random seed, and being like, oh, this is a wheat seed or something. I have no concept of that, or like a lot of the intricacies of soil. Like, I can look at the different layers within a trench or whatever, but you know, I'm not an expert on that particular area, so I wouldn't know. And it's the same with forensic archaeology. In the book, they don't say that they're forensic archaeologists, they say that it's an archaeology lecturer from the local university, and him and his students essentially are digging up the body, which straight away to me says that they're not going to be forensic experts, because it's Icelandic archaeology, so it's Vikings who predominantly burnt the dead, like they cremated their dead. So the chances that they would have found skeletal remains, that they would be experts in forensic archaeology, is super slim. Like, you don't find a lot of skeletons just randomly within the archaeological record anyway, so I just thought it was perfectly described the frustrations that all parties feel when something archaeological is discovered, and generally like archaeologists wanting to do it properly and do it slowly, because all archaeology is destruction. You are destroying something to see what is underneath it, so you need to do it properly. And yeah, everyone else just wanting it done, because how hard can it be to just dig up some remains? Yeah, sorry, I feel like I just went on a very big tangent, possibly talking about archaeology for far too long, but it was something I liked about the book, and I disagree with the majority of reviews that I've read that say the archaeology was unbelievable, because as a previous forensic archaeologist, it was perfect. Character-wise, the main character of Detective Erlendur is beautifully broken, I think is the best way that I can describe him. And what I mean by that is we get huge amounts of his backstory told because of a parallel story to the skeleton and the World War II stuff, that he's got his own personal demons, and you can see how those demons are impacting the decisions that he's making. The actual writing of his backstory just perfectly complements what's going on and doesn't sort of detract from the fact that it's like a side story. It's not detracting from the main story, I mean by that. I do feel like I connected more with the detective in this one than I did with him in Jar City. That could be because it has been a long time since I read Jar City. We're talking years. So it could be that I've just sort of forgotten the connection that I felt during Jar City, but I definitely think that character-wise he was more rounded and human in this book. Throughout this book there are some pretty graphic descriptions of domestic violence. Unlike The Creak on the Stairs, which I will leave my review for up there, the domestic violence in this didn't leave me with like an overwhelming sadness. Instead it left me really angry. I think this is possibly a slight spoiler. No, it is a slight spoiler, but very early on there is a description of domestic violence, and it's brushed off with police essentially saying, oh, it's just the guy, you know, it's just the husband sorting his wife out because she's not doing what she's supposed to, and she's probably been drinking, and it's just not acted upon. It's just kind of a, well, it's his wife, he can do what he wants sort of attitude. And whilst that initially made me angry, there's then some other parts later on in the book where one of the detectives has that same dismissive attitude about the remains, and well, what does it matter? It's probably just somebody who went for a walk and didn't come back. Why are we doing any of this investigation? It's that same kind of dismissive attitude throughout, and it just left me really angry because of how the attitudes were towards the domestic violence. The domestic violence writing is pretty graphic and it's not a nice read. It does make you uncomfortable, but I feel like that's what it should do given the subject matter. Like, it's not done in a gratuitous way or like shock for shock's sake. I think it is just done to just show the depth of domestic violence that was going on and the different forms that it can take. Like, Iceland is not painted in this book as, you know, a magical place where everyone believes in trolls and fairies and like midnight sun that is your typical view of Iceland. It is very much painted as a gritty, raw city, and I enjoy that element of it. Not necessarily like the domestic violence part, but the actual grit given to it, because ultimately Reykjavik is a city. It has the same problems as any other city. It's just because it's a small city in a small country, it seems to get sort of brushed over a lot more, and this book makes sure that you can't brush it over because of how graphic the descriptions are. I couldn't put this book down. The flows and the dimensions of the characters just kept me reading. Not so much for the skeleton to find out like whose it was, what had happened, more so the other elements and the other characters, to just find out what happened in their lives, what sort of their story was, rather than the story of the skeleton. And I think once you know what the deal is with the skeleton, like whose it was, what has happened to them, that sort of thing, like right at the end of the book. I think the lack of focus on the skeleton is kind of what makes this a good book. We could have just had the story told from the person whose skeleton is their point of view, but it wouldn't have had any impact. And yeah, it's a character-driven book, and it's a great example of a character-driven book, and that's why I really enjoyed it. One element of this book that I really enjoyed was that there were able-bodied and disabled characters, which is something I don't think there is enough of in literature, and certainly not enough of in the genres I read. The representation just doesn't seem to exist, that like disabled characters can exist within fiction as well. It's just something that is very much missing from the books that I read, and I really enjoyed that this sort of put that right in a book. Obviously there needs to be more, but I liked that the way that it was done and the way that the disabled character was described and their particular journey. I think that was also really well written and not done in a derogatory manner. Overall, I gave this book 4 stars out of 5. Would very much recommend it, but I would put a trigger warning of some of the domestic violence stuff because it is heavy. But overall, I thought it was a really good read. Couldn't put it down, read it very quickly, and can't wait to read the next book, which I think is Voices. I have Voices on my to be read pile, and I've got it marked up as the 3rd, but now I'm totally confused because of the whole switching the order with the English translation. So maybe it's not the 3rd at all, but we'll see. That's everything for today, so thank you for watching. If you have read Silence of the Grave or Jar City or any other interesting book, let me know down below in the comments what you thought of them, and I'll be back next time, I think, with another review. You'll find out if you hit subscribe. Ooh, professional YouTuber segue. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.